I'm going to sit on the stool instead of behind the podium. I'd rather do it a little more casually. It looks like a good group here. Has everyone read the first Dewey book?
Yes.
Good, because that helps us. We get a little farther along the way instead of me explaining that night in January when I found Dewey in the book drop, which I probably told that story 10,000 times now. It's funny, people say, well, you have a whole new career as an author now and touring around the country, and I say, well, not totally, because I've been talking about Dewey for 25 years. It's just on a bigger plane and with a lot different audiences. Do you want me to use a microphone?
Yes, yes.
I'll grab it. Okay. Is it on?
No.
Now it's on. Hello.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome the newcomers. Please have a seat. I'm going to be really casual tonight about the talk because I'd like to go the direction that you would like to go. So if you have any questions about the book, the first book, writing, the touring, the things that have happened to me since the book came out, whatever pleases your fancy, I would be happy to answer. But of course, we're here to talk about the second adult book, which just came out, called Dewey's 9 Lives. The reason we wrote this book was because I get fan letters not only from all over the United States. Probably most of you don't know that the first Dewey book is in 37 countries. And we are on 9 bestseller lists in some of those countries. So Glenn and I have not only toured a lot of the United States, we've also toured Turkey, Portugal, and England. And I get fan mail by the tons from just about every country in the world, plus a lot of people, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and a lot of guys on Navy ships who have been very touched by the Dewey book, and I think probably for a reason. It's a feel-good book, it's peaceful, it's calm, and it brings back the good things in life, the simple things in life. And so I'm surprised by a lot of the soldiers I hear from, but I guess I shouldn't be. I also have tons of fans all over the world, all the way from 8 to 12-year-old boys. It surprised me. They ask the best questions at book signings, and they've practically memorized every word of the book. So that's a little strange, but I will tell you that since the first Dewey book came out, it was on the bestseller list for 46 weeks, 3 at number 1, and has stayed selling really well until just now. The paperback came out for the holidays. So the paperback is out also this month. In the meantime, we've published 3 children's books, and I don't know if you've seen them, but if you haven't, you should need to take a chance. Yes, because they're gorgeous. The illustrations are wonderful. Yeah, I'll hold this one up if you don't mind me borrowing. This is our first Dewey children's book, and this is the story of how he came in the book drop. And if you have a friend or a grandchild or a niece or a nephew, this also made the children's bestseller list. It's up for Book of the Year in Florida and Nebraska for next year. And the illustrations are absolutely magnificent if you haven't seen it, so take a look at it. And I will mention that that's part of what I call Dewey's magic, is all the things that have happened to me since I met Dewey. There's all this magic around me. And one of the things that happened was the illustrator I had chosen to do the children's book could commit to doing this one, but couldn't commit to doing all of them. And I wanted only one image of Dewey, only one artist. So my publishers in New York said, well, you're coming to New York next week. We'll pick a bunch of top illustrators and we'll have their work out on a table for you to look at when you come, and then you can choose whom you like. And I said, well, you know, I really don't care what they've done in the past. I care what they do with Dewey. I care how Dewey looks and that his image is kept the way it should be. So all of these illustrators had 2 days to either oil paint, watercolor, or whatever, a picture of Dewey's face. And it was a quick deadline, but when I walked into this giant conference room in New York and they had all these illustrations laid out on the table, the one in the center grabbed me immediately. It was like Dewey looking right back at me. And so I went over and grabbed it, and my agent said, well, I know this is going to take a while, so I'm going to step into the hallway and make a quick phone call. And I picked up the picture, I looked at it, and then I looked at the illustrator's name, and his name is Stephen James. My brother, who died of cancer at age 23, is named Stephen James. So it was like part of the Dewey magic, and my agent came back in, and we already signed the contract before he got back in the room. The next book that we came out with was then a middle grade Dewey, which I don't have with me here. It's called, I have wonderful friends in the front row. Okay, Dewey the Library Cat. This is the middle grade version of the first book. It's the same story, but we took out a lot of the history of the town. We took out a lot of the medical issues and so on. And we changed the wording, I would say more, not for children, but for reluctant readers. There are a lot of children who enjoyed the first Dewey, even though it was an adult book. But this is written for younger kids or kids who don't read quite as well. And it also has 8 pages of colored pictures in it, so that's enjoyable for kids. It also makes a wonderful chapter book for parents to read to children if they read a chapter a night before they go to bed. So that came out in May, and then in September we came out with Dewey's First Christmas. And the illustrations in this are also by Stephen James, and it's absolutely glorious. They decided long ago when we were going to do this one that since it was a Christmas book, they wanted it extra rich and special. So after Stephen did all the illustrations, they actually shipped this over to Europe, had it printed on special paper and with deeper dyes, so that the colors are magnificent in this book. I'll just show you a couple pages quick. Whoops, if I can hang on to it. Whoops. Now this first page won't mean anything to any of you, but in Spencer they have the night of the Grand Meander, which is when everyone goes downtown on Grand Avenue and wanders around looking at living windows. Each of the businesses have people in their windows acting out some kind of living Christmas theme. And there's hot chocolate and Santa and cookies and music and all kinds of things. This is exactly what Spencer's Grand Avenue looks like during the Grand Meander. I mean, he went on a virtual tour of our town and even did the street lights exactly the same. This is amazing to me at night. And I'll show you, yeah, I'm kind of balancing things here. See if I can find a bigger picture. There's a beautiful picture of Dewey during his first Christmas. All of these stories are true, by the way. Very, very little is added. But Dewey discovered a skein of red yarn that very first Christmas when he discovered the Christmas tree and how much he loved the Christmas tree. And so that yarn was his favorite toy for 19 years, and I still own it. I still have it at home. But this is the new children's Christmas book. And so we're very pleased with that. And then, of course, the next book out is Dewey's 9 Lives. So have I been busy writing? Yes, I have. 3 books and 2 tours in 1 year, plus 3 foreign countries. So I've been all over doing a lot of things. But the reason for the Dewey 9 Lives is because as I was touring and talking to people, not only was I hearing stories about Dewey that I hadn't heard before, I was also hearing people's reactions to the first book, and how many people would write to me and say, I've never written to an author before, ever, but I had to write to you and tell you how much the book touched me. That's the best compliment. People are telling me that I've made them go back to work, or they've decided to go back to school, or they're in a bad relationship and they're going to get out, or they're a breast cancer survivor and they're going on. They're single moms and they're, you know, it's amazing how many people that we've touched with this book. And so we needed to get some more of the story out there. So Dewey's 9 Lives is not exactly a sequel, wasn't meant to be, although we try and answer all the questions that I get at every book signing in that book. Where's my ex-husband? Did I ever find a man? Do I have another cat? How are my grandkids? All those questions hopefully are answered in that book. Plus there's more Dewey stories, but what we discovered is there were also some amazing cat stories out there in the United States. We limited it to the United States. Actually, I heard stories from all over the world, but we took my thousands and thousands of letters, and Brett and I sat down and went through them and picked, not all the best ones, but a variety of wonderful stories of other cats and their people and the impact that an animal can have on a person's life. And I think you all know that, you know, there are therapy cats and therapy dogs, and they're going into nursing homes and all kinds of situations. And it is true that cats reduce stress and, you know, give you that touch that you may not get from another human for a while. So there are some marvelous, marvelous stories in here. I'll share just a couple of my favorites with you. If you haven't read the book yet, please do. And if you don't like cats, it's not exactly a cat book. Neither was the first Dewey book. I don't consider that a cat book. That's a story about life and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and surviving and enjoying life. And this book hopefully does the same for you. We have some funny stories and some sad stories and so on, but one of my favorites is about a guy called Bill Bezanson. Now, Bill was in the Vietnam War. He was over there during the Tet Offensive in the late 60s, and he had a horrible job. He was the soldier who dug the tunnels and crawled through before all the soldiers did to make sure there were no mines, no explosives, and no Viet Cong hiding ahead of him before the rest of his soldiers came with him. So, very scary job. Awful job. And the Tet Offensive was horrible over there. And he talked to me in his letter about man's inhumanity to man in that war and what it did to him. And so I was intrigued by that, and so I called him, and then Brett, my co-author, called him, and we talked to him a number of times, and his story was so amazing that I'd love to meet him. He lives in Seattle, but I didn't get to Seattle on this tour, and he couldn't come where I was going to be, but I feel as if I know him very well, but I've only talked to him on the phone. Anyway, he talked a little bit about the horrors of what he saw over there, and then he came home from Vietnam, and you all remember, if you're old enough, what it was like when the soldiers came back from Vietnam. No one wanted to talk about what they did. They were given no respect. And basically, Bill had undiagnosed post-traumatic stress, and he just unhooked himself from life. He didn't have any connections with human beings anymore. Basically, he would get a job, make enough money to drive somewhere else, get another job, and just move constantly. And he might stay in a town for a year or something, but every September, which was the anniversary of the Tet Offensive, he would have to move. He didn't know why, but he'd have to move. Well, one early morning, it was 5:30 in the morning, I don't remember what town it was, he was driving down the street, stopped at a red light, it was dark out, and he heard a thunk on the top of his car. And so he got out of the car and looked up on the roof of the car, and there was this tiny little kitten that had been dropped by an owl, believe it or not, right on the roof of his car, and was severely injured. And so he took the kitten off and saw that it was bleeding and severely injured, and he thought, what am I going to do? And he looked, and right there was a veterinary clinic, right on the next corner. It was dark, but at least it was a veterinary clinic. And so he ran down the street and he kicked on the door, and happily the vet was in the back treating another animal. And so came to the front door and said, well, he's very badly injured. I don't know if I can save him or not. It's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. But if you're willing to pay for it and stick around, we'll see what we can do. So they named the cat Spooky because of the spooky way he came. And Bill had to get a job and pay for all the veterinary bills and stay in this town. And day by day, as he visited Spooky and started talking to the vet and making friends in town, he started to reconnect with the rest of the world. Now, it didn't totally work. Soon Spooky was well enough to go on the road, and so traveled with Bill a lot. But Spooky not only supported him, but gave him the courage to find different ways to give back and to reconnect with people. And so he became, first of all, a hypnotist. And he was a hypnotist who worked with people with post-traumatic stress. And he still didn't even know that he had it himself, even though he was treating others. Then he kind of accidentally started working with hospice and started working with dying patients, and helped a lot of people cross that line, and which was amazing to me, that he could give and go through such a stressful, trying job when he had post-traumatic stress himself. But he managed to do it, and he managed to start reconnecting with people. The funniest image of Spooky, I think, is that Bill also rode motorcycles. And so he had a little helmet made for Spooky and little clear goggles, and they would ride to Sturgis every year for the big bike rally. So Spooky was around for 20 years, a few more than that, and Bill ended up with another cat. It wasn't until 9/11 that he realized that he still had post-traumatic stress and that he still had issues he had never dealt with. So he went into counseling. He's not only much better, he's in wonderful contact with his family. He's married now, and he does not have to move every September. However, he still says, I have to paint a room, at least, every September. But it's amazing stories like that that made us write this book, because we realized, although I swear Dewey was not a cat, he was an old soul in a cat's body, there are some wonderful cats out there who have done amazing things for their owners. And that tie between a human and a pet is almost impossible to describe in words. But once you read these stories, these are ordinary people in this book. We didn't pick anybody special. We didn't want any cats that leaped over tall buildings in a single bound. And I don't agree with all their decisions that they made about their cats, whether they kept them outside or didn't spay them or whatever. But every single person loved their cat, and their cats loved them. And there's some wonderful stories in here. You'll laugh and you'll cry, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as the first book. Does anybody have any questions, by the way, on writing the book or... Yes?
Has the success of Dewey in any way affected the economy of Spencer?
A little bit, yes. It's amazing how many people are making what I would say is a pilgrimage, and not just from the United States. We're already on our third guest book down at the library, or they are. Each book holds about 1,300 names. The last time I checked, and this is quite a while ago, we were up to every state in the United States and 19 countries. And I'm getting letters every day from people in Milan, Italy, or Austria, or Finland, who are saying, we're coming to Spencer next summer. And during summertime, the library does about 5 to 10 tours a day. During the height of the Dewey craziness, as I call it, they were doing 5 to 10 tours an hour. And a lot of the library staff tell me that they'll go out the back door to take the garbage out or go to lunch and find people in the alley with cameras taking little pictures of the book drop. So yes, in that way in the economy, it's been huge for Spencer because we've had so many visitors. It's been wonderful for the Chamber of Commerce. They now have on their stationery, it says home of Do We Read More Books? I will tell you that when Spencer went down to see the legislators at the Capitol this year, they always take a little treat for the legislators. This year they were round sugar cookies with Dewey's face on them. So yes, in that way it has, with people coming in. And of course I've helped with proceeds from the book have gone to the library, have gone to other causes in town, and right now I'm working on, hopefully if you're aware of the first book, we have the largest county fair in the world in Spencer, the Clay County Fair. They have a brand new slide this year, or they just introduced it in September, that is 70 feet high and 125 feet long. It's huge. But I've worked years and years since 1975 with the ADA Council in Spencer, working for getting handicap awareness out there. And there is no elevator on this new slide. It's just rings, metal rings. It's not even a ladder and it's not even tilted. It's straight up and down. There's very few people who can climb 70 feet straight up in the air on these narrow little metal rings. And so I called the owner. The fair doesn't own the slide. It's actually owned by a guy who owns 4 slides in 4 states at different fairs. But I got in touch with the owner and I said, do you realize how many people you're missing out on who would love to go down that slide, including me, by the way? I'm not climbing 70 feet on those tiny little rungs. Why don't we put an elevator on that slide so that people in wheelchairs or the other disabled can enjoy that slide as much as anybody else? And he said, well, I never thought of that. I said, well, you should. I said, there are busloads of special adults and kids that come through for the fair that would love to go down that slide but aren't able to. I said, there are people like me with hidden disabilities that would love to go down that slide. So we're working on that right now. The ADA Council is working on it with the state of Iowa, and I will be donating a slide or an elevator for the slide when that gets done. So I'm trying to help out my community as much as I can. I love Spencer. I'd love giving back to Spencer. And Dewey's Magic's still whirling around out there. So, anyone else? Yes?
Has there been pressure to get another library cat for the Spencer Library?
There was pressure to get another cat, but the board is different than the board who accepted Dewey. That was many, many years ago. Boards change. Board personalities change. The board that was there when I left was not the board who would have ever accepted Dewey. They were totally different. So they never really wanted the cat around, but they also said no because they didn't feel they could ever replace Dewey or come up to that standard, and I think that's very true. So although a lot of people in town were upset that there isn't a library cat, I think that's probably a wise decision, because I don't know how you would ever come up to that level again. I do know that there have been 5 attempts to leave library cats that have been turned down. But one gal in town, her name's Shirley Seltzer, she works for the school system. She was driving last December, no, 2 years ago December, down the road to work one morning, and it was a day like the day I found Dewey. It was very icy and snowy and 10 below zero, and she saw a truck swerve in front of her to miss something, and she thought, well, maybe it's a rock, but she saw it move. So she got out and found another little kitten that was buried in ice and had twigs and everything frozen to his body. So she picked him up and she thought, great idea, library cat, because he looked like Dewey. So she took him home, gave him a bath to warm him up, and then asked her husband if they could keep him. And her husband said, no, you already have 5 cats. No. Take him down to the library. So she did, and of course the library turned them down. But the library staff knew that I had an interview that afternoon with a Japanese crew, magazine crew, at the library. So the minute I walked into the library, they didn't even let me take my coat off. They said, we have a surprise for you, and they pushed me into my old office and shut the door. And around the corner, here's this little orange tabby kitten. And so Glenn and I, we didn't want a cat at that time. I wasn't ready for another one, and I'm traveling so much, I didn't have time to care for one. But by the time we got done picking him up and hearing him purr, we were falling in love. And so we now have Paige Turner. That's his name. And he's 2 years old today. Actually, today is his birthday. If you read 9 Lives, the last picture in the book is Glenn and I and Paige Turner.
Oh, that's Paige Turner.
Now, he weighs 22 pounds. He weighed 16 pounds before he was even a year old. And he has feet like a Labrador dog. So we're expecting more growth. But he would have never made it in the library. He's scared of everything and everybody. The doorbell rings and he's gone for at least 4 hours. He goes into what we call a cat coma, where he won't answer his name or respond to anything for about an hour. And then he's like, oh, hi, where have you been? He's very strange, but he's a lot of fun, and we love him dearly. And thank goodness we have an Aunt Dorothy who babysits with Paige Turner when we're on the road. So he's at Aunt Dorothy's house right now. But,
Can you also give a plug that if you haven't read it, the afterword in here is adorable, because you didn't know Paige was a.
Yes.
That's the bit. That was so cute.
It was. Well, when we found Paige in the library that day, the staff was guesstimating on whether he was a girl or a boy. And we were kind of voting, and half of us were farm kids, and we decided we knew more than the town kids did. And so we all decided it was a girl. And so when I put it on my website that we had found a little girl kitten, one of my fans, I think he was about a 12-year-old boy, said, well, how about the name Paige? Because you're turning a new page in your life, being an author. And so we did, and then we took him out to the vet, and the vet examined him, and he said, well, I have one little surprise for you. He's fine, and he's very underdeveloped. Don't tell him that, but he's a boy. And so that's when we had to add Turner, Paige Turner, so that it fit. But yeah, that was very funny. Everyone thought he was a girl, and even the vet had a hard time telling that he wasn't a girl. But he's wonderful, and he's goofy, and he's funny, and he's a lot of love. Anybody else got any questions? Yes.
Any idea how Dewey would have interacted with other cats? Did he ever?
We only had a few instances to go by. Now, we did have guide dogs coming in, and he paid absolutely no attention to them whatsoever. He didn't care that they were in there. He didn't even look at them. They weren't interesting. And I think he knew they couldn't pet him or hold him, so he didn't care. Well, why bother? But the one cat encounter we had was hysterically funny, because my parents went and adopted a brand new Persian kitten. And they knew the staff quite well. The staff knew that Mom and Dad had lost, a Persian kitten that was very important to them. So the staff said, well, you've got to bring Max down and show him to all the staff. We really want to see him. So Max was a 4-inch by 4-inch blue Persian ball of fluff. More hair than cat. Just this tiny little thing, and absolutely adorable. He's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful face. But he had been in a cattery that had 40 cats there, lots of males. So he had been around a lot of cats and knew how male cats protect their territory and how cats are supposed to behave. And so we put him down on the floor near Dewey, and this little bitty tiny thing arches his back and hisses and swats at Dewey and is indignant, and his fur sticking out all over, and he's ready to attack, and Dewey's just like, interesting. Strange little thing, but interesting. And then Dewey just yawned and walked off and went to his box and took a nap. It was like, I don't care. I don't think he knew what another cat was. He had come to us so young and he'd never seen another one. Like I said, he'd seen the guide dogs, but he really didn't care. Now, Max would have taken him in a minute, but he it wasn't like he never saw a mouse. We never had any mice, but we would have pet week and we would bring in gerbils and things, and he really didn't care. As long as it wasn't another human who could pet him and love him, it was just like, whatever. So I don't think he would have cared one way or another if another cat had come in there, but yes.
I don't remember. I read the first Dewey book, whether you mentioned that you had grown up with any animals or pets. I do have to tell you, before, I grew up in Spencer, Iowa.
Oh my goodness.
And lived there after, I was married for a few years. So, but I didn't spend much time. I used to go to the old Carnegie Library there. But, it was pretty wonderful to see my hometown on the front page of all the newspapers and everything.
Oh, good. It's nice to have another Spencer person here.
Yeah.
Terrific.
So anyway, I couldn't remember whether you'd grown up with
I did. I was a farm kid, so we always had animals. Not so much in the house. as outside. My first cat's name was Snowball. And we had Mama Kitty. We called her that because even if they weren't her kitties, she took care of them. She nursed 4 baby rabbits to adulthood. She was a mama. That was it. And so we always had, you know, cats and dogs and all kinds of creatures around on the farm. And then when we moved to town, when I was 14, my mother had a Siamese cat that was named Toby, who was huge thing. And he was pretty funny too, because my dad brought home a little tiny poodle puppy one night, and my aunt had bought this little white poodle and couldn't take care of him, and he was just a tiny little thing, and he was crying and crying and crying. And we were trying to eat dinner together as a family. There were 6 kids, and it was pretty noisy in there with him crying, and we'd given him a blanket, an alarm clock, and a heating pad, and anything we could think of. Nothing worked. And Toby was laying up on top of the refrigerator, sound asleep, and he finally, opened one eye and looked over at this box and got up very casually and yawned and stretched and jumped down on the stove and then jumped to the floor and walked very, very slowly over to this big box, and it was about probably 3 feet high, so the puppy couldn't jump out. And he just very casually stuck his head over the edge of this box and looked at this screaming little puppy and went, whoops, sorry, there goes my watch. But the puppy stopped crying. They became best friends, and Tony, the little puppy, never cried again. It was just amazing. So Toby was the runner of the house. They were buddies. They would play together all the time. But yeah, and I had cats when I was married. My daughter had cats. So I've always had cats and dogs around. I had Brandy, the dog. But once Dewey came to the library, I never had any more pets at home. Jody had a cat named Pickles. That was a very strange cat. But I kept the house open because I knew if Dewey ever became ill or anything else happened, that he would have to come home with me. And he did come home with me. If we were going to be closed more than 2 days in a row, holidays, or if we were remodeling, where he had to be out of there for a couple of weeks, he was very happy at my house. But he was more happy to go back to the library. He would love it at my home, and then at the minute we would get in the car to go back to the library, he would stand on the dash, and he's sliding as I go around corners, but he would literally start jumping up and down when he saw the library, and I had to grab him, because the minute I opened the back door of the library, he flew in there, and he was just like, oh, I'm home. But he hated being alone. He wanted the library to be open and his public to be there. But he was very happy living there. So, yes?
Well, you said he hated to be alone. Was he lonely at night when he slept there?
I don't think he was. I think he was so used to it because he was so young when it started that I think he played, he slept. You know, we would find the rubber bands missing in the morning. Remember? I don't know. We've always said in the book, that was his private time. We don't exactly know what he did, but I just know that he had a built-in clock. So if I was leaving, 10 minutes to closing time is when he would start doing his tricks, because he was trying to talk the staff into staying and not leaving. So he tried very hard for us not to go home, but he knew it was time to go home. And he knew when it was time for me to come in the morning at 7:30, he'd be there waving every morning with his left paw, and when it was 10 minutes to 4, or exactly 5 minutes to 4, he'd start crying for supper. He had a built-in alarm clock, and at 2 minutes to 9, when the public we were gonna unlock the doors at 9 o'clock, he was right there at the front door waiting for his public, and he never missed. He knew that it was time to open that door and let his public in, and he would lay right smack in front of the mat. So you had to either step over him or pet him when you came in. And if you
sleep during the day?
He did sleep during the day, as cats do. Yeah.
16 hours.
Yeah, but he didn't sleep 16 hours because he was so busy with people. But he would climb into a box or into someone's lap and take a nap. If there was a meeting going on, he had to get up and go to the meeting, no matter what it was, or how much they wanted him. If there were people who would say, we don't want the cat in our meeting, and so they would shut the door, and he would just sit there and cry like a baby and wait for someone to come out and use the restroom or get a drink of water, and then he'd sneak in. He loved meetings, and he loved big groups of people. Even 2 weeks before he died, when he was 19 years old, we had a party. There were 256 people there, and I thought, he'll stay in the back room. He won't be out here. He was in between everybody's feet, rubbing up against legs, and people were calling him around, and he was purring, and he loved people. He was an ambassador, and I always said he was our PR director, and he couldn't have done better if he'd have gone to school for it. So, anybody else? Yes.
Has it ever been discussed about turning it into a movie?
Yes. The funny thing is, before we even wrote the book, we had a 45-page proposal that we submitted to publishers, and the movie companies got a hold of that. So we already had 5 movie companies chasing me before we even wrote the first book. They wanted a movie. So there was a little bit of bidding war going on, and New Line Cinema bought the film. It will happen, I just don't know when. The problem is the script. It's been rewritten I don't know how many times. There are 5 producers who are also trying to get their wording in the script, along with the scriptwriter we hired. And so it's very hard pleasing all of them and getting a decent script. What I've seen so far is the Hollywood version of Iowa and the Midwest, which is nothing like where I live. Dewey is nothing like Dewey. I'm nothing like me, and they actually make fun of my state and Spencer, and I'd probably have to go into the witness protection program. Meryl Streep is still planning on playing me. She's agreed. But it will depend on scheduling, because she's getting a lot of offers for films, and it will also depend on how the script turns out. If the script is not up to my standards, I don't even want it submitted to her. So we're kind of in twilight zone. The movie company has until January 1 to start production, and they cannot start production until the script has been approved by me and the movie company, and we're not even close, I don't think. I expect what will happen is either they will try to get in under the deadline at the last minute, or probably what we will do is sell the movie to another studio in January and try to get the right film made. Because we hired a filmmaker or a script writer who had been a Dewey fan for 15 years. And she actually came out to Spencer and spent a week in my home. And so we hired her on purpose so that we would get the movie that we wanted, that would match the book. And I don't know where she was visiting, but it wasn't where I was living. Not good at all. So even if this movie gets made, it is not going to be anything like the book. In this movie, Dewey collects women's lipsticks and steals them. He cries a lot and runs around. I get fired, by the way. It's terrible. So I don't know. They keep telling me, Meredith Finn, who's the vice president of New Line Cinema, keeps swearing to me that I'm going to love the movie and love the script. I have yet to see that happen. So I hope it gets made, but I'm not chewing my fingernails over it every day, because I have lots of other things to think about, and there's lots of other Dewey things coming up. So I will tell you that we are in the process. A friend of mine who owns a bookstore, she actually owns 2 bookstores in Spirit Lake. We're putting a bookstore up in Spencer, which will be Dewey Read More store, and it will be half bookstore and it will be half Dewey memorabilia. So all things Dewey that are available will be available at this store. If you haven't been to his website, if you go to DeweyReadMoreBooks.com, you can not only purchase all of the books, you can purchase posters, t-shirts, puzzles. I think you'll notice This is my husband, Glenn Anderson, Albertson, by the way. Albertson. If you open his shirt, there's one of the t-shirts. They come in onesies and all children's sizes and up to 6 sets in adult sizes. So, and there's lots of other Dewey things on the horizon. We're working on a Dewey plush. We were hoping to have it come out with a Christmas book, but it's not quite ready yet. But the prototype got to my house last Tuesday. I'm not there, so I don't know what it looks like, but it is at my house. So there will be a lot more Dewey stuff coming along. We hope to keep writing children's books. Whether there'll be another adult book, I don't know. It's a lot of work. I keep telling my publisher and my co-author I don't want to be writing when I'm 75 and 80 and doing these tours, but we'll see what happens. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes?
Working with another writer on the book about a subject that you're really intimate with, I'm curious as to what your process was regarding, because obviously there were things that you thought maybe you thought were great for the book, and he's like, well,
Yeah.
how did that work out?
Yeah. He's asking about two authors writing a book together when they don't know each other, and one's passionate about the subject and the other one doesn't really know it. And that actually happened. I had 3 agents contact me after Dewey's death and asked me to write a book. 2 of them wanted quick, cute little quick sellers that I didn't want. I wanted quality. The third was a real publisher and with a really good agency. And so I told him, I said, I'm too busy to write this book. You know, I work full time. I teach classes for the state of Iowa. I would need a co-author. And he said, well, I'll find one for you. So he gave me like 4 names the next day. And I interviewed the first 3. They were women. They were nice. They were fine. But it didn't really click. And the last one was a man, same age as my daughter, who lives in Louisville, Kentucky. And I thought, there is no way. You know, I'm a woman, single woman, lives in Iowa. This is about my cat. How on earth are we going to ever be able to work together? Well, at the same time as I was saying that, he was saying to my editor in New York, okay, let me get this straight. You want me to drive to Iowa, to some podunk little town, talk to a librarian about a cat that's dead. I do not want to do this. So we both were reluctant. But when we got on the phone, his name is Brett Witter, and we clicked within 5 minutes. I don't know what it is. It's part of that Dewey magic. We talked for hours, and he got excited about the story because he realized that there was a real story here beyond just some little cat thing. And he sent me, I think, about 3 or 4 paragraphs that night after we had spoken. And when I got them, I literally gasped out loud because it was like hearing my own voice. He had me down perfectly. And it was like, wow, I can hear that coming out of my mouth. And that's the way we work together. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I'm so grateful that it happened. We did 8 months of actual writing on the first book, and apparently for 2 authors who've never worked together before, that's some kind of record in New York. But we worked wonderfully well together. And I would just say to him, we would work for hours on the phone or on the computer. He also came to Spencer like 3 or 4 times and got to know the town, and we got to know each other and spent weeks there. But the main way it worked is we just talked for the first 4 months, for hours, you know, remembering anything about Dewey. And he went through all of the scrapbooks and the pictures and the magazine articles, and then he would write something, and then I would say, no, that's not right, that's not the way it was, or yes, that's it, until we got the feel of it. And then the hardest thing was we kept trying to write a cat book about Dewey, and it didn't work. Everything else kept sliding in. So we finally realized that the 3 main characters were myself, the town of Spencer, and Dewey. And unless we had those 3 pieces, we didn't have a good book. Once we realized that, the writing went very quickly, very smoothly, and we were able to put it together into a bestseller. And I think that's why it worked. Is if we'd have tried to tell the Dewey story as just a Dewey story, it never would have gone anywhere. it was those three main characters that put the real book together. So, and we love working together. Even on the children's books, it's enjoyable. Although that's much more difficult because trying to tell a story in 36 pages with so many words that you're limited to, every word is precious. But I think I had more fun writing the children's books than he did because I got to be a little more silly, and we have Dewey words now, like doolicious and smellyious and all those kind. Babies are smellyious. That's what Dewey always thought. But we have a wonderful time writing together, and I'm hoping that we write another one together. But anybody else got any questions? Yes, in the back there.
Yes, I just had a comment. It seems like Meryl Streep would be a great choice since she was in The Bridges as Madison Coney.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons. She loved the book, but she also really wanted to come back to Iowa. She fell in love with Iowa when she did that first movie, and so she's very excited about doing it. And I have to tell you a funny story. We didn't know who was going to play me. They were throwing names around, and it's like, oh yeah, right, this is going to happen to me. But they were throwing a lot of big actresses' names around, and they said to me, who would you like to play you? And I said, well, how could I ever choose that? And they said, well, who would be your dream person? And I said, well, the dream person is Meryl Streep. Who else is there? But that's not going to happen. Well, I was in Minneapolis at the Mall of America. I was ready to go on stage. There were 550 people in the audience who had been waiting hours for me. And my agent called 5 minutes before I went on, and he said, guess who's going to play you in the movie? It's Meryl Streep. And I started, screaming, and he said, He said, the deal's not done yet. You can't tell anyone. So I went on stage, and I was trying to be so calm, and the first question I got is, who's going to play you in the movie? But I did keep it a secret until it was official. But yeah, that was one of the most exciting moments, and I had to pretend to be so calm, and inside I was jumping up and down. But I hope that happens. I hope that the movie is good enough for her. And I can't even imagine, see if you can imagine, Meryl Streep walking around trying to learn your mannerisms and your life. I mean, how bizarre is that? Quite wonderfully bizarre, but it is bizarre. So, anybody else? Yes.
About the movie, did you approve of the cat that they chose, or how does that work? If they trained him and then it's another year.
Yes, I think they'll probably do it as they did with the dog show that was on, with Marley and Me. They used 22 dogs for Marley and Me that were lookalikes from old to young, and they could do different tricks, but they looked enough alike. And I think that's what we've talked about in the movie, is that they'll use a variety of cats who look alike but are different ages and can do different skills. One who can wave, one who can jump on the bookshelf, one who purrs, and who knows. But I think that's probably what's going to happen. But they will not select a director. They won't find a cat. They won't hire a cast. They won't do anything until the script is approved. So nothing can move ahead until that is done. So they won't even discuss cats right now. It's all script. So, anybody else? Okay, yes.
Are you on the road a lot?
Am I on the road a lot? Yes, way too much. I love touring, but the travel is pretty much a nightmare. But we have been touring basically for 2 years because it's not just the one book. And we were thrilled when we were invited to come to England, and then Portugal invited us, and then Turkey had us come over for 2 weeks. And that was especially exciting because it was the Minister of Culture who invited me to come to Turkey because they have a huge literacy problem there. And he wanted me to talk to both the schools, the children, and the parents about literacy and about reading to children every day, and to get the parents to read in front of their children to show them that reading is a good thing. So we spent five days, I think, in Ankara, the capital. And then we had 5 days in Istanbul, where my publisher is, and that was like heaven, because we had days off where we could tour and go to museums, and they treated us like king and queen, and And having the Minister of Culture of a country invite you over is the way to go. Really the way to go. I was seated at the head table with him, and I got the biggest bouquet of white roses I've ever seen in my entire life. And we were treated wonderfully over there. I love the people of Turkey. And you might want to know that the children's book that you have there, the blue one, that is the very first book ever published in Turkey in hardcover. They print all their books in softcover unless they are serious history books or presidential books. Then they're coffee table books. But all of their bestsellers and everything are softcover paperbacks, and this is the first book ever in hardcover. So that was quite an honor. And we are on the bestseller list in Turkey, and Brazil, and Spain, and Italy, and lots of other places. And now the new book is selling, and I just signed a contract with Siberia, believe it or not. Siberia and Lithuania were the two newest countries. So, they're small countries and small contracts, but it's amazing that people all over the world know about Dewey. I think my favorite thing is that he's been translated into so many languages, but my favorite is Sanskrit. To know that Dewey's story is going to be translated into the oldest language in the world, that just blows me away. I just think that's amazing. And I have to tell you, my grandchildren are in the children's book, and a couple of months ago, my 6-year-old granddaughter, she's a twin, Nathan and Hannah are 6-year-old twins, but Hannah came to me and she said, "Grandma, am I famous because of the Dewey book?" And I said, "Well, sort of." And she says, "Does everybody in the world know my name?" I said, "No." I said, "Only those people who have enjoyed the Dewey books and were, enjoyed them enough to remember that your name is Hannah. But you really think I'm famous?" I said, "Well, a little bit." And she said, "Oh, good. I absolutely love being famous." So that was pretty cute. Yes?
The obvious. Do you find that as you travel that more people are naming their cats Dewey?
I can't tell you how many Dewey cats exist in the world right now. Every day I get a letter from someone else who has named their cat Dewey. They pick different second names, but yes, almost everyone's kitten since this book came out is named Dewey. So there are a lot of Deweys out there, that's true. But I get marvelous mail, and I have more pictures of cats than I know what to do with because they all send them to me. But that's true. I think, well, if we do a calendar, I want it to be all Dewey, but we're going to see on that. But yes, it's wonderful. I think the two greatest compliments I got were, number one, on the first review of the first book, somebody said it's a love letter to libraries. And that makes me feel wonderful because I love libraries and I tried to get that through. And the other greatest compliment I got was from, this is from a number of people, but people who said, this book is not just going on the bookshelf, it's going down through the generations of our family. And I don't think I could have a nicer compliment than that. That's just a beautiful thing to hear. And if you've written to me and you haven't heard back, sorry. You're not going to, probably. I'm too busy. I have all these children who write to me and say, you have to write me back. I want you to be my pen pal or my email pal. They don't realize. And people think they know me because of the book, because I put my life story in there. So I get letters that say, you know, well, if you're ever in Detroit, we have a basement bedroom waiting just for you. It's a lot of strange things, but a new and wonderful life that Glenn and I have all over the world. So, okay, unless there are any more questions, yes, a couple more.
Would you ever have an interest in trying to do the screenplay yourself?
I would love to do the screenplay myself, but that's not what the studio wants. They don't even want Brett to attempt it. They want someone who's a screenplay expert to do it. So we're struggling. Hollywood is a lot different than the rest of the world. They do things their own way, and that's not an option. I was offered the job of reading the Dewey middle grade book on audiobook myself, and I even had to turn that down. And I really wanted to do it, but that involves going into a studio for weeks and weeks and weeks. You know, doing a few lines at a time and then doing retakes, and I just can't do everything. So, no, I don't even want to attempt that. I thought, you know, this is a beautiful book. It has all the things in there they need to make a film. What a snap. But I guess not. It never works that way. So I saw one more hand up. Yes.
I just wanted to know, do you usually try to work with animal shelters in the cities that you visit to help kind of promote adoptions for animals?
We don't always, but it's happened many, many a time. This book, we put a lot of animal shelters in the back of the book because of the contributors, the people who shared their stories with us, and to try and get people. We've talked a lot about, as Dewey gets bigger, doing some kind of national campaigns. We've also talked with a lot of pet food stores and things like that on doing different campaigns. So that may come up in the future. And we certainly support that. But I need people to know that I have more in my life than just a cat. You know, people keep reducing my life to Dewey and I, and there's a lot more to it than that. But he certainly was my best buddy and always will be. So, yes.
Final question. Are you still in your position as Spencer librarian, or have you had to take a leave?
I had to retire because I had to write this book. I did go to the board, and I agreed to write the book on company time and share all the proceeds with them, and they literally laughed at me. And the last thing one of the board members, not a close friend board member to me, but one of the male board members said to me was, "Don't quit your day job, honey."
I guess he's eating his words.
I hope so. I hope so. But no, they wouldn't let me do it on company time. They didn't want to share in any of it. So between my health and the book, I had to quit because it was a full-time job. And I'm actually working harder than I ever did as a librarian because I have no nights and weekends. As an author, you don't. The publishing world is very strange, and they have this wonderful habit of about 4:30 on Friday afternoons emailing you saying, "We know we needed this 2 weeks ago, but now we need it by 8 a.m. on Monday. Happy weekend." So the life of an author is not nearly as glamorous or carefree as I would like it to be, and there is a lot of traveling and a lot of work that goes into it, but it's still a lot of fun. Yeah, one last one.
I was just curious how you brought Spencer so to life in your book. What did Hollywood make it out to be versus what it really is?
I don't know if I want to go into it too much because that script is so bad and it has been revised a bit since then. But I'll give you one example. The Clay County Fair, as I said, is one of the largest county fairs in the world. 327,000 people in 9 days this year. That's not little. In a town of, 12,000 to bring in that many people in 9 days. They had in the script that the only entertainment at the Clay County Fair, besides the pigs and chickens and cows, was that everybody jumped up and down on corn kernels for entertainment. Now, the Clay County Fair brings in worldwide entertainment. We have huge shows. Country, western, rock, old rock, you name it. The groups you'd like to see, they've been there. There's all kinds of wonderful things at the Clay County Fair, and to reduce it to that, and I said, "Why on earth did you put that in there?" And she said, "Well, I found it somewhere on the Clay County Fair site." I said, "Maybe in 1907 they jumped on corn kernels, but strange things like that. It's the stereotype look at Iowa and the Midwest in making fun of everything that I hold dearly. It was just the strangest experience. And they have me getting fired for being compassionate. They wanted to show me as a compassionate person. So they have me fired and then rehired a couple months later. But I'm fired because I have a homeless family in the library. Now, I've always taken pride in being a professional and never doing anything stupid to lose my job. You people know that. You don't break the rules especially when they make sense. Now, if I would have had a homeless family come in, I would have called a church, a shelter, sent them to a hotel, took them home with me, whatever. But I let this homeless family sleep on the floor of the library, and I lose my job over that. Now that's not compassionate, that's stupid. I was never stupid at my job, that's why I kept it. So it was just things like that that just make no sense at all. And then I was told that all of the script readers in Hollywood, when they read that chapter, they just cried and cried. And I said, well, good for them, but the rest of the world is going to think that's really dumb. So, okay, well, let's move on to book signing then. So I will be happy to answer your questions, sign your books, and if you want pictures, do that too. Thank you.